It was a very, very difficult movie to make. Do you think I can maybe speak a little bit longer, just so I can, or do you want that short amount of time?
Short amount of yeah, short sentences would be great for me, so I can speak quickly and then you can continue.
Okay, because you're gonna, okay.
Yeah, because I'm gonna speak here.
But they're gonna edit it, because it will be weird if I keep speaking like in little.
See, don't you worry about the video because she has to write the notes as well.
Okay, okay. So, it's a very, very difficult film to make in many different ways. And, obviously, from a safety point of view, we're in very dangerous places. I'm not a war reporter. I've never been in situations like this before. But this film led me into some pretty dangerous places, into shootouts, between the vigilantes and the cartel, into meth labs, into places of torture, places I never could have imagined being in. And, but for me, those moments weren't the most scary moments. The most scary moments for me was the time I spent with a young woman who was kidnapped by the cartel with her husband, who witnessed her husband being chopped up to pieces in front of her and burned to death. And to hear her speak about those horrors, and to look at this woman, and to see her body that was there, but her whole soul had been sucked out of her, and she had these very deep, hollow eyes. And to think about how we're the same species of human beings that would do that to other people, that stuck with me much more so than anything. Do you understand?
Sí, más o menos.
¿Entiendes?
Y recuerdo
Sí.
mucho el rostro de
Sí.
esa mujer, lo recuerdo
Sí.
mucho. La escena en la que Manuel se estrecha en un abrazo con su padre y se le caen las lágrimas al padre, me quebró directamente. Y pensé cómo se logró eso tan espontáneo y tan cercano.
The scene where Manuel hugs his
Father,
father,
yeah.
And then he cries. She wants to know, how was that scene filmed? How did you make it so spontaneous?
I've had
Very close.
Yeah, so.
See, I've had a few people over the past couple of weeks say to me, that was amazing how you recreated those scenes in the meth lab, or you recreated those scenes in the shootout with actors, and it's all real. The access to me was very important, and I wanted to take this story that was, we've seen so much in the headlines, we've seen so much coverage in pop culture and TV shows and movies, but I wanted to show on the ground, through real people, what was happening. And, I was able to spend so much time in Michoacan. I was there for almost 9 months, 1 to 2 weeks every month. And I was able to develop really deep relationships with the doctor, with a lot of different people. And so that scene with his father, I'd been filming with the doctor for many, many months. And, I was very intimate with him and his family. And so, that scene was completely spontaneous, as were most scenes in the film. I ended up with a story that I never could have predicted. I had no idea where the story was going. I originally thought I was telling the story of guys in white shirts fighting against guys in black shirts. And over time, I realized that the story was much more complicated, that the lines between good and evil were much more blurry.
Al principio el paralelismo que haces entre el caza cárteles de Arizona con Manuel me parecía absurdo. Y con el correr de la película le fui encontrando el sentido.
At first, the comparison that you do between the cartels and the groups of medalists was for her a little bit strange or absurd. But after that, she realizes that
Le encontré sentido.
that there is a sense to
¿Qué,
it.
qué me puede decir al respecto?
What can you say about it?
I think for me, at the heart of this film are two men, El Doctor and Naylor. They're both 55 years old. They both believe that the government has failed them. And they both took the law into their own hands to fight for what they believe in. But the circumstances are much different. In Mexico, you know this better than I do, but the violence is so real, it's visceral. 80,000 people killed since 2007. 20,000 plus people disappeared since 2007. Whereas in Arizona, that violence is much more theoretical. It's much more of a fear that these Mexican drug wars will seep its way across our border. And so the comparison was very interesting to me. They're not the same, but there's a lot of things that are similar. And I think another important thing is that for me, the film is both timely and timeless. Throughout history, we've seen armed groups, men and women, rise up to protect their town, to fight against evil. We've seen that story play out throughout literature, throughout history, and we see that playing throughout our world today. And we'll continue to see that play out throughout our future. But part of what happens when these groups rise up is you can't control everything. You can't control, despite maybe perhaps having good intentions or noble intentions of the leadership, you can't control people within your group. And especially in the case of the autodefensas, we see that there's a lot of people with different motivations, different goals. We see that in Arizona too, but much more dramatically in Mexico with the autodefensas. And ultimately, that's what leads to the downfall of the autodefensas, is there are so many different people fighting for power, so many people with their own different agendas, that's part of what led to the downfall of the autodefensas.
Two last questions for time. ¿Qué papel ocupó Catherine Bigelow sé que es una de las productoras, si él pudo hablar con ella, compartir algunas cosas?
What is the role of Catherine Bigelow in this film? What does she do? Have you had the opportunity to talk to her?
Of course, yeah. I'm a huge fan of Catherine Bigelow. Zero Dark 30 and Hurt Locker are two films that, are two of my favorite films that I learned a lot from. And after the film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in the United States, after that, she saw the film, and she was very moved by it. And so we started communicating, and she came on board as an executive producer of the film to help promote the film, to help elevate the film, to help make sure that there's an important conversation around the film. She very much believed in it and believes that there should be an important dialogue around what the film shows. And so I'm very grateful to be, partnered with her on this film, and it's been wonderful. So.
The last question es, ¿qué piensan de Meireles? Este hombre que se va descomponiendo al final, ¿no?
What do you think about Meireles? This is a man that is decomposing throughout the film.
Tu pensamiento,
Yeah.
your opinion.
What is your opinion?
What's your opinion?
What is the opinion?
No tengo, estoy desde ayer que no sé qué pensar después de ver tu película.
I don't have an opinion. After watching your movie, I don't have an opinion. I don't know what to think.
Y estoy muy triste, very sad.
And I am very sad.
I think one of the things that I wanted to do with the film was show the complexity of humanity. Show the complexity in all of us. You're complex, I'm complex. Our motivations, the questions you're asking me, why are you asking me? Why am I answering them the way that I am? We all have our own motivations. And so I think what I wanted to do with this film is show that complexity. Show, not just make the simplistic portrait of a man or of a movement or of a story, but show the complexity in the different shades of gray. And that was very important to me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.